There's three things that make Astartes the greatest warriors in the galaxy: their enhanced physiology, their superb armor, and their weaponry. Today, we'll be focusing on their ranged weapons. This video is a general overview of the weapons on the battlefield of the 41st millennium employed by the Emperor's Angels. That means no primarily Heresy-era equipment, though we'll likely do that video a little bit later down the line, so do hit the subscribe button. Bolt weapons are some of the most iconic weapons in 40k. They're named such because of the fist-sized, self-propelled explosives they fire called bolts. Bolts come in many varieties and can be tailored to near any foe, but your standard bolt is more than enough for most of the enemies of man. Once a bolt round has penetrated the foe, it will explode in a spectacular shower of gore. The most well-known and perhaps most iconic weapon in all of 40k is the bolter, also known as the bolt gun. This weapon has been the primary armament for the Astartes for over 10,000 years. Being highly robust and taking two hands to wield, the bolter is ubiquitous to any chapter. Yet, as the images of this weapon roll by in the background, you might notice that there's a lot of differences between bolters. This is due to the way the Mechanicus handles the storing and sharing of its designs. Most technology in the Imperium is obtained from standard template constructs, or STCs. STCs vary wildly, but are most commonly a set of blueprints or instructions on how to make a piece of technology. However, all STCs are relics from humanity's golden age, usually excavated from some ancient human colony ruins. Forge Worlds find these STCs and are usually very jealous with their knowledge. This, combined with Space Marine chapters producing their own patterns, means there's more patterns of bolt guns than we could ever hope to cover in this video, though we do have a video purely about bolt weapons in the works, so keep an eye out for that. However, the most common pattern of bolter you'll see in the 41st millennium is the Godwin pattern Mark V-B, which seemingly has no specific Forge World of origin and is widely produced throughout the Imperium. It's worth mentioning hurricane bolters here, as essentially these are just 6 bolters slaved together to form one weapon, usually mounted to vehicles. A pair of hurricane bolter sponsons can effectively replicate the bolter fire of a full squad of Astartes. The bolt pistol is a smaller, more compact version of a bolter, taking only one hand to wield. With a smaller magazine size, but still taking the same mass-reactive shells as a full-sized bolter. This smaller size makes it an ideal weapon for close-quarters fighting, used primarily by assault marines, but near enough every Astartes carries this weapon as a backup. The bolt pistol, like the bolter, has numerous marks, patterns, and variants. Heavy bolt pistols are cool's improvement to your standard bolt pistol, packing a greater punch and being overall chunkier. These pistols allow Primaris assault units to pack more firepower on the battlefield. Guardian bolt pistols are only wielded by veteran members of the Death Watch, awarded to a Marine for going above and beyond the call of duty. Each Guardian pistol is wholly unique and will only ever be wielded by the Marine it's awarded to, custom tailored to that Astartes and inscribed with his name and the gallant deed that earned him the weapon. Should these weapons not be buried with their owner, they will be returned to the Death Watch, who housed them in a place of honor. A storm bolter is essentially 2 bolters strapped together, able to unleash a torrent of fire without impeding movement. Storm bolters are ideal assault weapons, usually utilized by Terminators and mounted onto Astartes vehicles as support weapons. The heavy bolter is essentially a heavy machine gun version of a bolter, taking bigger bolts and having a greatly increased rate of fire. This makes it a threat not only to larger foes, but to even other Astartes. The heavy bolter is a versatile weapon that can greatly boost the firepower of any tactical squad, or be wielded en masse by devastators for a punishing amount of mass reactive fire. A variation of the heavy bolter is the assault bolter. This creation of Call is essentially a heavy bolter designed to be wielded in one hand, wielded in pairs by Primaris interceptors. These weapons turn what is normally a long-range anti-infantry and anti-light vehicles weapon into a devastating close-quarters implement. There's also a variant of the heavy bolter which is essentially a normal heavy bolter and a heavy flamer strapped together, but we'll get to the heavy flame a bit later, known as the Infernus heavy bolter. This weapon also sports a suspender, which is anti-grav plating that makes the weapon much lighter to wield for the user. The Bolt Rifle is Call's innovation on the Sacred Bolter. Larger, longer range, and packing more of a punch, the Bolt Rifle comes in 3 variations, each optimized for a specific scenario. The Standard Bolt Rifle acts as a balanced jack-of-all-trades. Auto Bolt Rifles designed for assaults and maximizing rate of fire. And the Stalker Bolt Rifle, designed for long-range marksmanship engagements, effectively functioning like a Designated Marksman Rifle or DMR. Another variant of the bolt rifle is the heavy bolt rifle. This one is significantly different to other variants of the bolt rifle. Bigger, bulkier, boasting a higher rate of fire than the standard bolt rifle. Heavy bolt rifles are only used by Primaris in Gravis armor. In stark contrast to the heavy bolt rifle is the bolt carbine. Lightweight and built for mobility, the Bolt Carbine is primarily utilized by Vanguard Primaris units, often boasting a host of optical attachments to aid Vanguard units in advanced operations. The Instigator variant of the Bolt Carbine is stealthier, but has a lower rate of fire than a normal Bolt Carbine. Designed for extremely long-range engagements, Bolt sniper rifles also boast a plethora of optical enhancements. From high magnification to inbuilt precision Auspex scans, the optics of a Bolt sniper rifle are unmatched within the Imperium, primarily used by eliminators and scouts. These rifles utilize specifically designed rounds to make them able to handle any foe, hyperfrag to unleash a torrent of shrapnel into a horde of foes, executioner rounds, which are essentially tiny guided missiles, and mortis rounds, which inject the struck target with a self-replicating toxin. The toxin itself then rapidly mutates. This means it can overcome the adaptive abilities of foes, normally resistant to such weapons like other Astartes or even Tyranids. The Imperium is an empire built on faith and fire, so where would one be without its flamer weapons? These various weapons of war share one commonality: the ability to spew forth gouts of fire from various combustible fuels, the most common of which is promethium, which is a gel-like substance that reaches superheated temperatures, functioning essentially like napalm. Promethium is even capable of burning underwater. Your standard Astartes flamer comes in many variations as the bolter, when not being employed in fits of zealotry by religious chapters. The more tactically minded Astartes will employ flamers as urban warfare weapons, designed to clear bunkers and buildings of foes by filling them with fire. A rather common alternative tactic that displays the exceptional heroism of Astartes in times of desperation is when a Space Marine wielding a flamer will purposely detonate their fuel canisters, creating a huge incendiary explosion. Smaller and more compact, hand flamers have less ammo and much smaller reach than the full-sized version, allowing them to be used in extreme close quarters and still delivering a deluge of promethium. Like your standard flamer, but able to produce a larger gout of fire, the heavy flamer is only really employed en masse by chapters who specialize in flame weaponry, like the Salamanders, or other close assault specialists like the Blood Angels chapter. The Pyre Blaster and Pyre Cannon are the Primaris upgrades for the Flamer and Heavy Flamer respectively. They're sturdier and built with a much longer barrel, allowing it to fire with greater force and over a longer distance. Mounted on the Land Raider Redeemer, Firestorm Cannons are the largest flamer weapons employed by the Adeptus Astartes. With increased range, capacity, and intensity, the Firestorm Cannon is the premier flamethrower of the Adeptus Astartes arsenal. The Grey Knights, a secret Astartes chapter consisting entirely of Psykers, founded by the legendary Malkador the Sigillite, use a special flamer called an Incinerator, also sporting a heavier version. These powerful flamers are crafted only on the moon of Deimos in absolute secrecy, used only by the Grey Knights. These mighty weapons are fueled by Psy-Flame, a special mix of psychically charged and concentrated promethium. Infused with blessed oils, this deadly concoction can bypass all but the strongest demonic and psychic defenses. In addition to being an immensely effective flamethrower, its wielder can channel their own psychic might into the weapon, empowering the flames, strengthening them, and directing them akin to a firebender from Avatar. All this combined gives the Incinerator's flames an ethereal white azure glow, as if they channel the gaze of the Emperor himself to engulf their foes in divine fire. While not strictly a flamer, the Immolation Rifle is one of the rarest weapons in the Imperium of Man. What precious few exist are in the keeping of the Deathwatch. These weapons from the Dark Age of technology are designed for short-range engagements. Firing a short-range beam of intense heat, these weapons will cause unarmored skin to blister and boil. Under sustained fire, these weapons can literally cook a foe alive. Yet they produce no flame and can't set anything alight. Utterly deadly to organic matter, these rifles leave inorganic matter unscathed, making them extremely useful in cleaning precious machinery. Another type of flamer used exclusively by the Deathwatch is the Balefire Gun, not to be confused with the various balefire weaponry of the Heretic Astartes. This flamer fires a special mix of promethium and volatile radioactive compounds. These balefire guns are utterly devastating against lightly armored foes, and even dampen the regenerative properties of numerous Xenos. Due to these weapons' radioactive properties, they're infamous for their massive collateral damage, and are only really issued by the Deathwatch when they need to purge the most virulent of alien strains. Melta Weapons are some of the most powerful short-range anti-tank weapons in the Adeptus Astartes arsenal. The precise workings of Melta Weapons remains uncertain, as conflicting sources in the Imperium's lost knowledge ensure that we may never truly understand them. One posits that Melta Weapons fire a beam of intense microwave radiation. This intense radiation can melt even the thickest armor to slag in mere moments, whereas others, like the Space Marine games, pose the notion that the Melta Gun beam is more of a shotgun blast than an actual death ray. The standard rifle variant of a Melta weapon is known as a Melta Gun. Taking two hands, it is a favoured assault weapon of the Space Marines, able to punch holes through tanks and bunkers alike. Versatile, but extremely short-ranged, it's ideal for Space Marines being employed in close assaults. Only utilised by a few chapters, the Inferno Pistol is a compact version of a Melta Gun, allowing its wielder to deliver a devastating, extremely close-range beam of destruction. Inferno Pistols are extremely rare, and wielding one is a great status symbol, even for an Astartes. So rare, in fact, are these pistols, that there may only be a handful in any given sector of the Imperium, meaning that these pistols are reserved for truly the luckiest and most legendary Astartes, like Commander Dante, who carries an ancient Inferno pistol known as the Perdition Pistol. A Multi-Melta is essentially a larger, long-range melta, which fires a pair of beams for twice the destructive power. These twin beams allow a Multi-Melta to affect a wider range of area, effectively letting it punch larger holes through tanks, giving it a greater chance that it'll tear through some vital system. The Melta-Destroyer is essentially a multi-melta with one additional barrel, increasing the area it can affect even further, making this creation of Call an even more devastating weapon. Currently only employed on the Hammerstrike Stormspeeder, this weapon is primarily used as a bunker buster. Yet perhaps the most devastating Melta weapon is the Melta Rifle. These creations of Call come in a heavy variant. This weapon is at first glance simply a bigger, stronger version of the Melta Gun. Yet it is in how this weapon is employed is where its true strength lies. Melta Rifles are only ever employed in units of Primaris Eradicators. These squads will move up as one, unleashing a withering hail of Melta fire on a singular target, until that target is nothing more than a molten crater. Graviton weapons are poorly understood, and their origins are truly lost to the dark age of technology, but essentially they increase the weight of the object they're fired at, essentially causing their target to implode under the force of their own gravitational pull. Rarely seen even during the Imperium's golden age, what grav weapons have survived into the modern Imperium are fiercely coveted. Taking two hands to wield, the Graviton Gun is the basic rifle variant of Graviton Weapons. This weapon produces a highly versatile stream of graviton particles that increase the weight of whatever they're directed at. Under a fairly low intensity, this can simply be used to pin an opponent to the floor, incapacitating them for capture. Yet under a high intensity stream, the target's bones will begin to crack under their own weight, their organs rupturing, and eventually the poor unfortunate soul will be reduced to a crumpled mass of wet meat and armor. Graviton guns and Graviton weapons in general are more effective against heavier targets. In their pistol form, known as Grav Pistols, another property of Graviton weapons comes to the fore. Imagine, if you will, an Astartes in a duel with a lightly armoured foe. You may think this sidearm is useless, as it will take too long for an enemy to collapse under their own weight. Yet, Graviton weapons have a slowing property. Even a foe briefly hit by the stream will find their movement sluggish, meaning these Graviton pistols can be used to create openings in opponents' movements, allowing for a killing strike. Grav Cannons, the largest form of Graviton weapon employed by the Astartes of the 41st millennium, are capable of unleashing a much greater beam of Graviton particles than any of the other weapons we've talked about so far. In fact, the standard Grav Cannon employed by the Devastator squads of the Adeptus Astartes comes attached with a device called a Grav Amp. This essentially acts like a focusing lens for the Graviton particles, making them more precise and far more potent. The knowledge of plasma weaponry is all but lost to those outside of the Adeptus Astartes, where these weapons are only uncommon. Though, of course, many Forge Worlds do still produce plasma weaponry, they guard the knowledge of their production covetously. So most plasma weapons wielded by the Adeptus Astartes are produced in their chapter's forges, by their own artificers and tech marines. Artificers are, of course, chapter menials dedicated to the production of arms for a chapter. Plasma weapons are devastating, if temperamental weapons on the battlefield, superheating hydrogen gas and then firing it out via magnetic fields. These guns essentially hurl a miniature sun at the foe. The fourth state of matter collides with the foe, exploding over them in a molten sea, evaporating their skin, boiling their blood and melting through their armor. Yet these weapons are unreliable. Should their cooling vents be damaged or their magnetic containment fields fail, these weapons can easily maim or kill the Space Marine wielding it. Able to fire rapid bolts of plasma, the plasma gun is a standard rifle variant of plasma weapons. The most common pattern, known as the Rage Fire, is widely used by the Adeptus Astartes, especially the Dark Angels, who are the undisputed masters of the Dark Age weapons, and boast more plasma weapons than any other chapter. Still, most plasma guns are hundreds of years old, yet this does not dampen their effectiveness, being highly versatile weapons able to take on heavily armoured foes, like tanks, and still having a reasonable rate of fire. In the direst of circumstances, these guns, like all plasma weaponry, can be overcharged, making these already unreliable weapons fire even more dangerously, flooding the firearm with hydrogen as it unleashes the full might of the sun into its foe. Smaller, but no less dangerous, is the Plasma Pistol. Used primarily by assault squads and Space Marine officers alike, these pistols are extremely useful when a primarily melee combatant needs a boost in raw stopping power at range. Heavy and cumbersome, plasma cannons are one of the most potent plasma weapons in the Astartes armory. Due to their sheer size and power, plasma cannons are mainly employed by Devastator Marines, or on Astartes vehicles. The weapon generates a massive ball of plasma it can hurl at great distances, bathing the enemy in boiling nuclear energy. Just like the plasma gun and the pistol, this weapon too can be overcharged, increasing its already terrifying destructive potential. The Plasma Incinerator is Cole's refinement on the older patterns of plasma guns, coming in 4 variants. The standard Plasma Incinerator, like the Bolt Rifle, is versatile and essentially a bulkier and more powerful version of its firstborn counterpart. The Assault variant of the Incinerator is designed for rapid movements and maximized fire rate, while the heavier variant is designed for long range and low fire rate. Each of these are employed by the Primaris Hellblaster squads. Meanwhile, the Macro Plasma Incinerator is the vehicle variant, mounted on Redemptor Dreadnoughts, Repulsor Executioners, and even the super heavy Astreus tank. It is capable of surpassing all other variants in every regard, simply trading off size as it is far larger. Though the greatest accomplishment of Cole's innovations was in making these weapons far more reliable, only now risking overheating when the firing weapon is overcharged intentionally. The Plasma Exterminator is essentially a handheld version of the Incinerator, and is typically wielded in pairs by Inceptor squads. This allows Inceptors to take on more heavily armoured foes and even light tanks. Pairing this with their ability to drop from orbit makes Exterminators an ideal weapon for outflanking armoured foes, such as Traitor Astartes. Every type of weapon we've covered so far can actually be combined in the form of Combi-Weapons, usually 1 part bolter and 1 part plasma, flamer, melter, or graviton, the latter usually being a second barrel with limited munitions. Combi-Weapons come in many forms, from bolters with underslung flamers, to weapons reminiscent of a storm bolter, with one side replaced with a plasma gun. What Combi-Weapons offer is versatility, allowing a Marine to respond to more situations with the armaments at his disposal. A tank bearing down on you? Good thing you brought a Combi-Melta. A horde of Tyranids closing in, unleash that one-shot flamer and then start thinning them out with the regular bolter. Combi weapons have truly been synonymous with the Space Marines for as long as they've existed. Though the Imperium boasts a large number of laser weapons, the Adeptus Astartes makes use of comparatively few, mainly utilizing only heavy laser weapons such as the Lascannon. The Lascannon is a powerful, long-range heavy anti-tank weapon, capable of punching through thick armor and bringing down mighty beasts. This is the real anti-tank workhorse of the Imperium. Taking an immense amount of energy to power, these weapons are usually mounted on vehicles, or wired straight into the Astartes armor's fusion reactor. It is only due to their gene-enhanced strength that the Astartes can carry these brutally heavy weapons. Essentially a more rapid-fire version of a Lascannon, the Las-Talon is utilized by Stormhawk interceptors, Firestrike turrets, Primaris repulsors, and Storm Speeder thunderstrikes. The weapon fires 2 potent laser shots that are capable of a clean kill against even the heaviest of armored targets. Yet unlike the Las-Cannon, the Las-Talon is a close-range weapon, and sees severe drop-off in damage at long ranges. The Las-Fusil is a long-range laser sniper, essentially a precision-focused Lascannon. It is usually employed by Eliminators, who need to take down enemy armor or monsters, a task their usual bolt snipers would be ill-equipped for. The Heavy Laser Destroyer is the most powerful laser weapon employed by the Adeptus Astartes on the battlefields of the 41st millennium. Mounted on the Repulsor Executioner, this formidable laser poses a risk to even Titans, and is able to strike a foe from great range. It should be noted that there's one instance in a novel of Space Marines using multi-lasers. However, this was in a CS GOTO novel, so perhaps this is best forgotten. The Adeptus Astartes arsenal is varied, and even in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, bullets, slugs, and ordnance are needed. Thus, the following weapons are those that utilize physical projectiles, usually launched via good old black powder. There's nothing quite like a shotgun, and the Astartes Shotgun certainly doesn't disappoint. Usually employed by the scouts of a chapter, these shotguns lack the penetrative power of a bolt gun, but make up for it with their devastating spread. Ideal for clearing buildings or boarding actions, Astartes Shotguns are versatile and robust weapons. Used only by Primaris Marines, the Ironhail Heavy Stubber is a curious weapon. Created by Cole, it comes in both Icarus, anti-air, and regular variants. The Heavy Stubber seems to have replaced the Stormbolter as the standard pin-tool mount for most Space Marine vehicles. This is curious, as the Stubber in 40k terms is a more primitive firearm, more akin to our guns of the modern day. Unfortunately, we don't quite know what the capabilities of this weapon are, or why exactly it's replaced the Stormbolter. Autocannons are high-caliber advanced firearms that boast a high fire rate for their size, primarily used against tough, lightly armoured targets like orcs or tyranids. Autocannons are still semi-effective against space marines. Primarily employed on tanks, autocannons are mainly a support weapon in the Adeptus Astartes. Accelerator Autocannons have their origin in the Horus Heresy, and seemingly were lost at its conclusion, but have been reintroduced to the modern Astartes arsenal by Call, utilised by Primaris Vanguard suppressors and Firestrike turrets alike. These are essentially just autocannons, but with a much higher fire rate. The Demolisher Cannon is utilised by both the Adeptus Astartes and Imperial Guard, but the Adeptus Astartes use a special siege shell, consisting of an armour-piercing tip, the heavy shell casing and timed massive explosive charge, allowing it to penetrate into a building before detonating. This huge shell is launched thanks to a built-in rocket engine, essentially making it a giant bolt round. This does mean that the cannon has to consistently vent gas to avoid buildup, reducing its rate of fire. In addition, these shells are so large that only a limited number can be carried in a Vindicator tank, making these weapons difficult to supply. The Assault Cannon is probably one of the highest fire rate weapons we've covered so far, deployed usually by Terminator squads. This weapon can be mounted on various vehicles, featuring 6 medium caliber barrels. Assault cannons can keep up an insane amount of withering fire, ripping foes to pieces with just the sheer amount of bullets these weapons spew. Seemingly, Call's improvement to the Assault Cannon, the Onslaught Gatling Cannon, is primarily used on vehicles. Both it and its heavy variant are potent anti-infantry weapons. Icarus storm cannons are one of the best anti-air weapons available to the Adeptus Astartes. Consisting of 3 barrels, these rapid-fire cannons unleash a salvo of flak into the air, ripping enemy aircraft to shreds. Employed on the Stormhawk Interceptor and Stalker, it's effective as a dogfighting or stationary anti-air weapon. The Adeptus Astartes makes use of a great variety of missiles and rockets, from frag anti-infantry, crack anti-armor, to esoteric warheads like anti-plant, which is essentially a chemical defoliant like Agent Orange from the Vietnam War. Each of these missiles are powered by chemical propellant engines, and sometimes feature guidance systems. The most common Astartes missile launcher is the Soundstrike pattern missile launcher, which at standard fires frag, crack, and flak missiles. Flak missiles are particularly effective against enemy aircraft. The Soundstrike can only chamber 1 missile at a time, but is usually paired with a special backpack attachment and autoloader for the Marine wielding it. This allows the Marine to focus on firing rather than reloading. Unlike the Soundstrike, the Cyclone missile launcher can chamber a large number of missiles loaded onto its twin racks, usually mounted to the top of Terminator armor. Cyclone missile launchers provide immense tactical flexibility, as due to its large capacity it can have multiple crack or frag missiles loaded. Its mounting position means a Marine can use it completely hands-free, effectively allowing a Marine to fire it without a thought, while leaving his hands free to also wield additional weapons. The Whirlwind Multiple Missile Launcher is probably the most versatile missile launcher at the disposal of the Adeptus Astartes. Consisting of 2 missile racks, various patterns change the number of missiles that can be loaded. The standard missile used in the Whirlwind is the Vengeance missile, a high explosive missile containing a proximity fuse, which detonates when it detects it's near its targets, and showers the area in shrapnel. Hunter-killer missiles are effectively crack missiles, with sensors on the missile's nose guiding it through the environment to its marked target, using its stabilizing fins to make sharp turns. Hunter-killer missiles are usually mounted as add-ons to Astartes vehicles. They're one-time use weapons, and tend to be held on simple housings, attached to a vehicle if the chapter thinks that vehicle will need some additional tank-killing capability. Though quite possibly the greatest tracking missile in the Imperium's arsenal is the Sky Spear missile. Each one of these missiles has the servitorized remains of a chapter serf interred within it. Their brain is wired into the missile's sensors as they guide it towards its target. When the missile finally hits, it is extremely powerful, capable of blowing apart Tau Barracudas or even Hive Tyrants with a single hit. The Astartes employ a wide variety of grenade launchers, often mounted on vehicles. We won't cover many of them today, as they largely serve similar roles. Some fire frag grenades, effective against infantry, others fire crack grenades designed to penetrate armor, and there's little variation beyond that. Attached underneath a bolt rifle, an auxiliary grenade launcher is an excellent attachment to augment any intercessor's firepower, allowing the Marine to launch a frag or crack grenade at a great distance that they would otherwise be unable to reach. Seen only ever utilized by Captain Titus in the first Space Marine game, the Vengeance grenade launcher is a curious weapon created on the Forge world of Graia, just prior to the invasion of War Boss Grimskull. It launches 5 charges that stick to foes and can be remotely detonated. This weapon is still likely being approved or potentially disapproved by the Adeptus Mechanicus, before being distributed to chapters. Though if you've seen our Astartes vehicle video, you'll know that could take hundreds of years. The Imperium has precious few psi weapons. These are weapons that harness the power of the warp. What few they do have are almost exclusively used by the mysterious Grey Knights. Silencers, psi cannons, and heavy psi cannons all work in the same way. The wielder channels their psychic will into the weapon, resulting in it firing a beam of psychic energy. Silencers produce the weakest beams, but have the highest rate of fire, while the heavy psi cannons fire the strongest beam, but have the lowest rate of fire. Yet all these beams are devastating to physical matter, able to easily blast apart mortals and demons alike. The Astartes Weber is an esoteric weapon to say the least, designed to assist in capturing or incapacitating targets. This weapon fires masses of sticky, white filaments onto its target. Acting like quicksand, these globules begin to bind the foe's limbs together, solidifying like rockcrete until they're unable to move, allowing an enemy to be easily captured. The Conversion Beam Projector is probably the rarest weapon in the Astartes arsenal, usually carried by a tech marine due to the immense technical expertise and power required to wield it. This weapon fires a beam, which converts any matter it touches into pure energy, effectively reducing it to nothing. The further away from the target, the more devastating the effect of the beam. The Thunderfire Cannon is a quad-barrel cannon capable of a staggering rate of fire for such a large weapon. Thunderfire cannons are able to fill the air with a multitude of different shells, whether it's airburst shells raining shrapnel down on enemy infantry, surface contact shells that explode in devastating high-explosive barrages or subterranean shells, which burrow underground, upheaving the land in local seismic disruptions. This cannon is usually mounted on a self-propelled track with an attending tech marine, but is also the main armament of the Achilles Pattern Land Raider, my personal favourite Land Raider. And finally, let's talk about the heaviest weapon in the Astartes arsenal, a weapon weighed down by the grim reality of war in the 41st millennium, the Absolver Pistol. This pistol is carried by apothecaries and chaplains. It is essentially a heavy bolt pistol with better penetration. However, this weapon has a very clear and grim purpose: to give the Emperor's mercy to Astartes, who are beyond all other aid. We'd really like you to think about this. Imagine you're an apothecary, and you've spent hours, days even, desperately trying to save your wounded brother, most likely your friend who you've known for decades or even centuries. His blood is on your hands, his voice is still ringing in your head. Not even a dreadnought sarcophagus will save him. So you are left with only one option: the Absolver Bolt Pistol. And then, you have to move on. The weight of that pistol on your hip. And you have to wonder, how heavy does that pistol get? Brothers and sisters of the Imperium, the creation of these chronicles demands time, toil, and no small measure of coin. Each patron who joins our cause does more than support. They become part of the very war engine that drives these tales forward. From humble initiates to exalted demon princes, our Patreon offers many tiers, each created with unique rewards and honors. And at the end of every podcast, we pay tribute to our most valiant supporters, those whose names are etched in digital glory. Join us, and together we shall keep the lore alive.